Hello Year 10, this is now lesson 4 in your digestion and the digestive system in humans unit. So far in this unit we've looked at the components of a balanced diet, we've looked at what happens if you have an unbalanced diet, and last lesson we started looking at what happens to food and the enzymes that digest it as it passes through your body. Our objectives for today's lesson are going to be to label the parts of the digestive system. So by the end of today's lesson, you should be able to label all of the parts of the digestive system and to state the function or job of each of those parts. Previously in this unit, we've talked about the fact that the large insoluble molecules of food that you are ingesting need to be broken down into smaller soluble molecules that can be absorbed into your bloodstream. We last lesson looked at the 3 enzymes that carry out that process within your digestive system. I would like you now to just turn to somewhere in the back of your booklet or on the back cover where you've got a bit of space, or if you haven't got any space, just use a piece of paper if you have one, and I would like you to have a go at answering these 6 questions based on what we did last lesson. Pause the video now and answer those questions, please. Okay, so the enzyme that digests starch, you should have had that was amylase. Starch is digested into glucose. This is key information for this unit that you need to know. Which enzyme digests protein is protease. Protein is digested into amino acids. Which enzyme digests fats or lipids? That is lipase. And fats are digested into fatty acids and glycerol. Before we move on to look at the parts of the digestive system, there are 2 other substances that are involved in digestion that you need to be aware of. I would like you now to go back to this page in your booklet where we were last lesson recording the areas of production of the 3 different enzymes. As you can see in the key, we now have 2 other substances that are involved in digestion. So the first one is called bile, which we'll come back to later on. We're going to have a look at hydrochloric acid first. So this is the bottom substance on your list. So we're going to be colouring in the bottom circle. I know mine are not quite in the correct place there. So you need to again choose a colour for hydrochloric acid. I'm going to use green. So we'll colour in this circle. And hydrochloric acid is produced in the stomach. So we're going to add a little circle of green next to the stomach. At the bottom of that page, where you have that diagram we've just put the circle on, there is a bit of space. What I would like you to do in that space is to make a note of the information that I'm going to show you now. So if you can put a little sort of subheading, hydrochloric acid, and we're going to write this information down. So the stomach also, along with protease enzyme, produces hydrochloric acid. Make sure you're writing this information down at the bottom of page 10. The function of the hydrochloric acid in your stomach is to provide the correct pH for the protease enzymes. In the last unit, we learnt about enzymes in the first unit, we learnt about enzymes, and we said that each enzyme has an optimum or best pH that it will work most effectively in. So the protease enzymes in your stomach need to be in acidic conditions, and that is provided by the hydrochloric acid. So again, make sure you're getting this information written down underneath that diagram, please. We're now going to go back again to this diagram, and we're going to look at the last substance on there, which is called bile. So for bile, again, can you now choose another colour? So we're looking at the fourth circle here. Bile is a substance that is produced in the liver. So we're going to put a little circle next to the liver in whatever colour you've chosen for bile. And then bile is released from the liver into this little organ here, which is called the gallbladder. We'll come back to this a bit later on. And then the bile can be released down this duct into your small intestine. Make sure that you've now got a diagram that matches what you can see there on the screen. Again, now we're going to make some little notes about bile and the function that it has in the digestive system. If you've run out of space on the bottom of page 10, where we wrote the information about hydrochloric acid, there are some lines at the bottom of page 9 underneath that table, which we're not going to be using. So you can use those to write down this information if you need to. So as we saw on the diagram, the liver produces bile, which is then stored in the gallbladder before being released into the small intestine. If you can write this information down. Bile has two roles in your digestive system. The first one is to emulsify or break up fat into tiny droplets. So fat tends to stick together in big drops. So by breaking it up, by emulsifying it into smaller droplets, the fat then has a much bigger surface area. So the lipase enzymes are able to get to more of it to allow them to digest the fat more easily. So the first role of bile is to emulsify fat. The second function of bile within the digestive system, bile is an alkaline substance. It neutralizes the acid from the stomach. So as food passes from the stomach into the small intestine, it is acidic. The bile will neutralize that acid because the enzymes that are working within the small intestine would denature in acidic conditions. They need an alkaline or slightly alkaline conditions, which is provided then by the bile. So this provides neutral to slightly alkaline conditions in which the enzymes in the small intestine will work most effectively. So this information that's on the screen needs to be written down into your booklet. I would suggest you maybe pause the video now and make sure all of that information is recorded. We're now going to move on and think about the structure of the human digestive system. So we're thinking about what happens in each part as food passes through from the mouth all the way down to the anus. So the digestive system is made up of the digestive tract or alimentary canal, which runs from the mouth right the way through the body to the anus. It's about 9 meters long in length. There are, however, other organs which are involved in digestion which are not part of that tract. We'll start at the top. So we've got the mouth. In the mouth, as we discussed last lesson, we have saliva. The saliva contains amylase, so the digestion of starch, of carbohydrates, begins in the mouth. We also, in the mouth, have our teeth, which chew the food and break it down into smaller parts, which then allow us to swallow that down into our digestive system. So as food passes from the mouth, it goes down here, and you can see that this splits then into two tubes. The trachea, as we learned last unit, is where the air would be going down into the lungs, but food will be passing into the esophagus. So the esophagus, sometimes referred to as the gullet, is the pipe that food will pass down into the rest of the digestive system. This structure here, the epiglottis, should prevent food from entering the trachea. So when you swallow, that covers the trachea to prevent the food going down and causing you to choke. So food passes down the esophagus. It's squeezed down by a process called peristalsis, which we'll come back to later on in this lesson. It then enters the stomach. So food goes down the esophagus and comes into the stomach. While it's in the stomach, the food will be churned with the acid and the protease enzymes that are in there. So this is where the digestion of protein begins. The stomach is muscular, so it's mixing and churning up the contents while it's in there. From the stomach then, food will pass into the small intestine. So as you can see, the small intestine is a long tube. As food is passing through the small intestine, you will have all three of the digestive enzymes. So you have amylase digesting starch into glucose, protease digesting protein into amino acids, and lipase digesting fats into fatty acids and glycerol. In the wall of the small intestine then, there are tiny holes. Once the molecules have been fully digested, the products, the small soluble molecules, will be able to pass through those little holes and enter your bloodstream, where they can be taken then around the body. So the small intestine is where the majority of the digestion and absorption of food molecules will be occurring. By the time food reaches the large intestine, so it's gone all the way through the small intestine and then moves into the large intestine, all that's left would be waste materials, fibre and water. So as the food passes through the large intestine, what will happen there is water will be reabsorbed from the food. So as it's passing through the large intestine, water is reabsorbed from the food, leaving you with feces. Those feces will then be stored in your rectum until you go to the toilet, and then they will leave the body through your anus. Just one more little structure within that alimentary canal just to have a look at is the appendix. So the appendix is here, and the appendix has no function in humans anymore. So as I mentioned earlier, there are some other organs which are involved in digestion as well. So we've mentioned the liver when we were talking about bile. The liver produces bile. That bile is then stored in the gallbladder, which is this little green organ here, and will be released into the green tube there, which is the bile duct, to be released into your small intestine. The other organ on the diagram that's involved in digestion, which we did discuss last lesson, is the pancreas. So the pancreas in digestion is involved in producing the 3 digestive enzymes. So carbohydrates like amylase, protease and lipase. I'd now like you to turn a few pages on in your book. It's quite a few pages. If you've got page numbers, this is page 20. So you should have this diagram and the questions next to it. So this diagram is showing you the parts of the digestive system that we've just talked about. I'm going to ask you in a minute to pause the video and try and answer these questions. So you need to give the names of structures A to J. And then down at the bottom where you've got the bullet points, you're just going to write in the letter of the part that carries out that particular function. Now you might need to rewind the video and have a look at the information that I've just given you, or you have got the names of the parts in your booklets on page 14. So if you go back to page 14, you should be able to see the names of the different parts so that you can get the spellings correct. So pause the video, have a go at filling these in, and then we'll have a look at the answers. Okay, so if we have a look then at the answers to this page, so if you can tick your answers if they're correct or write in any corrections that you need to. So part A, you should have that is the esophagus. So part A is the esophagus. Part B is the stomach. C is the pancreas. D is the large intestine. E is the rectum. And F is the anus. G is the liver. H is the gallbladder. I is the small intestine. And J is the appendix. With the labels then down at the bottom, so absorbs a lot of water would be the large intestine, so D. Contains acid is the stomach, so you should have B in there. Stores feces would be the rectum, so that's part E. Makes bile is the liver, so that's G. Joins the throat and the stomach is the esophagus, so part A. Most absorption takes place here is the small intestine, so that's I. Has no function in humans is J, the appendix. Feces pass out here would be F, the anus. Makes pancreatic juice is C, the pancreas. And this label isn't in your booklet, so you will need to add this in at the bottom. Stores bile would be the gallbladder, which is label H. I'd like you to stay on that page where we've just done that activity, because we've got some space down there at the bottom. In that space, we're just going to make some little notes about this process called peristalsis. So food is moved through your digestive system by this process. So you need to be able to explain how this works. So food is moved through the digestive system by peristalsis. It involves muscles in the gut wall pushing the food along. There are two sets of muscles involved. You have circular muscles, so those will squeeze inwards, reducing the diameter of the gut when they contract. So if you look at the diagram at the bottom, so this is the circular muscles here are contracting and narrowing the diameter of the gut. Those work together then with the longitudinal muscles. So those will be reducing the length of the gut. So the circular ones are squeezing in and out. The longitudinal ones are squeezing sort of up and down. So by those two things happening, that works together to produce contractions, a bit like a wave. So wave-like contractions, which will squeeze the bolus, which is what we refer to the piece of food as, down through the gut. So the circular muscles will be squeezing in, the longitudinal muscles will be making the length of the gut shorter as they're contracting. So working together, they will be squeezing that bolus of food down through your digestive system. So I would like you to now write this information down on that page we were on, where you've got the blank space at the bottom. Pause the video and get that written down, please. Our last activity then for this lesson will be page 16. So page 16, you have at the top the story of digestion. So this just basically summarises what happens to food as it passes through the body. Again, pause the video, fill in the gaps. You've got the answers down at the bottom. You may want to use page 9 to help you, because it does summarise where each of the enzymes are found and where they work and what they break down. So use that information and obviously what we've talked about to help you fill in these gaps. Right, okay, if we have a look now at the answers for this page. So in the mouth, the teeth chew the food to increase its surface area. This is sometimes called mechanical digestion or ingestion. This means there are more opportunities for collision of food particles and saliva in the mouth. The saliva contains an enzyme called salivary amylase. This breaks down carbohydrates like starch into simple sugars. You don't have this bit on your page. We swallow, and a ball of food known as the bolus, you already have this on your page, is squeezed down the food pipe or esophagus by an action known as peristalsis. The food arrives at the stomach where conditions are acidic. This is ideal for the protease enzymes which digest protein into amino acids. As food leaves the stomach, it is met by an alkaline mixture, which is called bile. The liver produces bile, a green alkaline substance which is good at emulsifying, breaking up large particles into smaller ones, fats. Bile also neutralizes the acid stomach contents to provide ideal conditions for the enzymes from the pancreas and the small intestine. The pancreas and the small intestine release all three enzymes to complete any digestion. Carbohydrates to digest starch into sugars. You could put amylase in that gap as well. Obviously, amylase is an example of a carbohydrate, so either answer there is fine. Protease to digest proteins into amino acids. And lipase to digest lipids or fats into fatty acids. And glycerol. Once all the food groups have been fully digested into small soluble molecules, they are ready to pass from the small intestine into the blood, where they can be then transported around the body. So in the small intestine you have these structures which you can see in the picture. So in these structures, the villi, this is where digestive food will pass into your blood, but we'll have a look at these in a bit more detail in a later lesson. So all that is left behind by the time food gets to the large intestine is water and any insoluble materials such as fibre. It is here that water is reabsorbed into the blood, leaving solid feces. They are stored in the rectum and leave the body by the anus. We're almost at the end of today's lesson. What I would like you to do in preparation for the next lesson for this unit, so look at your timetables, see when you have the next lesson of biology. Before that lesson, I would like you to complete the page that you can see on the screen. So this is on page 15 in your booklets. This is going to be a summary of what we've discussed in the last two lessons. So what happens in each area of the digestive system, which enzymes are produced there, and you could also include what the enzymes are doing. So the first box at the top would be for the mouth. This box would be for the liver. This one is for the gallbladder, the small intestine, the appendix. This box at the top is actually for the esophagus. This one's for the stomach, the pancreas, the large intestine in this box, and then the rectum and the anus in this one here at the bottom. Use all of the pages of your booklet to help you, particularly the table that you have on page 9 will be useful, and the diagram where we coloured in what substances are found in each part of the digestive system. So in preparation for next lesson, I'd like you to complete this page, please.